Men and women be friends?
I think it depends upon who you're talking about. The reality is every single relationship, whether male, male, female, female, or male, female, every single relationship on the planet Earth is based upon some form of attraction. Now, it may not be emotional, it may not be sexual, it may not be physical, but there's something that draws you to that
Right.
person,
Mm-hmm.
and you come together based upon that commonality. And if you don't have boundaries in your relationship, if you haven't guarded your heart, it can lead into something that is inappropriate.
Can you give us some examples of solid boundaries in terms of, male-male friendships, female-female friendships, male-female friendships? Like, how can you establish a sense of boundaries that are sort of universal?
Okay, so if I'm in a relationship and I have an opposite sex friend prior to my relationship with that friend has got to change. The nature of it has got to change. So if I'm the type that can chill with my partner, my friend, go to the movies, talk on the phone, and have a good time, and now I'm in a committed relationship, imagine my woman knowing that I'm on the phone with my friend, engaging in just casual conversations, just kicking it, when I have somebody in my own home that I should be building that same type of rapport with. So it's got to change, because if it doesn't, it can create vulnerability within your existing relationship.
And in what way would you suggest, or should it change? In what way?
Well, my thing is this. If I have a friend of the opposite sex, that friend has to now befriend my wife or my girlfriend so that there's a level of comfort there. If my opposite sex friend has a boyfriend, right? Now we have to become couple friends. So I shouldn't be able to do anything outside of the presence of my wife that I would do with an opposite sex friend, because it can create all types of relationships. Now, when you think about infidelity, a lot of infidelity within relationships take place with quote unquote friends.
Well, Hassani, listen, that sounds really, no, that sounds great.
Yes.
But let's make it practical. So you say to your wife, you say, honey, I want you to become friends with my friend who I've been friends with for a very long time. And your wife says, yeah, but I don't really mess with her like that. Like, I don't really get along with her that well. What does that then do to your friendship? How do you navigate through that type of situation? Because that's not always the case, where two women are willing to just go, oh, okay, let's be friends.
Well, see, the reality is, once you enter into an intimate, committed, long-lasting, mutually beneficial relationship, that becomes your primary relationship, right?
Okay.
And everything else comes secondary to that. So whatever creates vulnerability or issues in that relationship, you've got to make certain adjustments and tweaks. If I'm on a job working 9 to 5, I'm developing relationships with all types of people.
Sure.
And the reality is, you spend more time with people who you're not in your home with than those in your home. You spend 8-9 hours with regular people, and according to statistics, you only spend around 5 to 10 minutes of quality conversation with your partner.
Wow.
Already, just from the numbers alone, that presents a problem. If it's a business relationship, fine, let's keep it business. The problem is when it turns from business to casual, and the reality is the foundation of all communication is intimacy. Intimacy means intimacy. So when I allow you to see inside my heart and see inside my mind and see inside my emotions, that creates a problem. And so those platonic lines all of a sudden become very blurry.
Do you think a couple could have a sexual relationship and still be friends?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. First of all, by definition alone, when you look up the word platonic, it means intimate and affectionate relationship with no sex. By definition, sex is more than just a physical interaction. You bring your heart, your mind, your spirit, your body, your everything into that experience. So I may be in a sex ship with someone because I'm forced to, because the person I'm having sex with doesn't want something more, but it doesn't mean that there's no emotional attachment that I have with that other person that clouds that interaction. And oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, there's some type of emotional connection that one has for the other that the other one just doesn't have.
What should you do if you're in a platonic friendship, but one person has feelings but the other one doesn't?
It's important to have that conversation, because I've been in that scenario before.
Friend
And that's what happens, because
zone.
you're communicating, you're conversating, you're socializing, and it's quite natural when you have a man and a female together over the course of time, something's going to develop, and it can become awkward and
it's
weird.
very awkward.
But you have to have those conversations and have them in a palatable way to just let that person know that, you know what, we're not seeing the same thing or looking for the same thing.
Can you talk about the difference between male-male relationships, female-female relationships, and male-female relationships? Because I have to say, I have a friend in particular who's a guy who just doesn't see the value in female friendships. He's like, I don't need women friends, like, in any way. They don't add any value. Like, my boys are my boys. but what am I going to get out of a friendship with a woman?
Well, I think what's interesting, when men are alone in their own social space, and when women are alone in their own social space, there are conversations and interactions that they have that they wouldn't normally have with the opposite sex. Because there's a comfort zone there. There's a level of trust. And I think it's important to have opposite sex relationships because you can learn how the other sex thinks. You can learn how they communicate.
So do you have a book or a seminar or something on this that you teach in the mass brothers?
Because
Yes.
Absolutely. Actually, my wife and I formed an organization called Couples Academy.
Awesome.
And we formed it because we were committed to placing couples on the path to fulfillment, because there's so many people who are miserable in their relationships and haven't realized that it really comes down to skills. Just like you work a job and you develop skills to make you a better employer, you develop skills to make you better at your craft and acting, you can develop skills, couple skills, relationship skills to make your relationship work. And that's what we do.
So do you think exes can have healthy friendships?
I think it's all case by case, because if we have children together, then you're going to be in my life.
Right.
So I've got to make that thing work. But if we don't have any type of attachment to one another, I don't know how it can necessarily be productive, because when you look at the studies and the research, when you begin to connect with former partners and lovers, your brain memorizes the emotional and romantic feelings that you once had. And through conversation, it can come back alive very, very quickly. That's what happens with infidelity on the internet, online, particularly through Facebook and other social media platforms. So you got to be really careful about the nature of that relationship.
Yeah. Let's say you're in a relationship with the same sex.
Okay.
Do the same rules apply?
When it comes to intimate relationships, whether it's opposite sex or same sex, the reality is those rules do apply. And let me just be clear. I'm not suggesting that we should not have friends. I think it's important to have intimate, romantic friendships, relationship, and then social friendships. But the nature of those relationships have to be crystal clear.
You ever find that men have their own issues befriending other male friends?
I think men in general have a problem socializing in a larger sense. A lot of times as men, we're wired to be very independent. We run to our cave. We don't necessarily need a lot of relationships. So you have to understand, the way we interact with each other is different than women. When women get together, what do? They connect.
Sure.
And they connect based upon communication. So the minute a woman walks in the door to the minute she leaves, they're talking and talking and talking. Where two men can come together, never utter a word. We could be watching a basketball game, but we bond.
Yeah.
Bonding doesn't require a lot of communication necessarily.
Right.
So I think, when dealing with opposite sex, relationships, you have to kind of navigate how to make things work based upon how you're wired, and you have to learn and develop certain social skills to make these relationships work.
What if I don't like my man's male friends? And what effect? No, because that happens.
real.
You fight over friends. We're always talking about women and men.
Especially in a committed relationship, because sometimes you can have friends that are a complete negative influence on your partner's life. And you can see things that they just can't see. And so you have to have some serious conversations. But the thing is, it's about how you present it. When you come in a very boisterous, aggressive, you need to cut him off type of thing, no man or woman for that matter is going to take to that. But when you come and your conversation's more palatable, and it's more about you as opposed to me, because I don't want you to have that friend maybe because of me as opposed to you. And so I think it's important to just really communicate. And I think at the end of the day, we don't spend enough time really doing that and bringing understanding. Because if I could shed light to you regarding a friend and help you see something that you didn't see, it may work.
Sonny, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Join the conversation using hashtag.
You have a better chance at salvaging the relationship. And you have to let people be themselves. A lot of times we try to force our friends or siblings to be who we want them to be. You should do like this, go to work like this, take this job, marry this guy. This is how you should handle this. Let people live their life.
How is working licensed marriage and family therapist Eve Marie Ford knows a thing or two about the importance of bonding? Welcome, Eve Marie. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
How important is honesty, complete and total honesty in a relationship?
I think it's very important. It's really number one, to be transparent. That's your best friend. That's your road dog. That's your partner. But I was saying earlier, and I asked you this, Renee, if you feel like the word omission, seems to be something that I use.
Omission?
I don't necessarily have to say that. You didn't ask me about it.
It just got left out of the conversation.
Is that a bad thing?
If it's conveniently left out because you know basically your spouse or your partner and how they would respond to you,
right.
Then no, that wouldn't be okay.
That's
I
not
think
okay.
Allow them to process whatever information that you have and you work through it.
Is your spouse supposed to be your best friend?
I would say yes, definitely.
Really?
Oh, yes. I think your spouse definitely should be your best friend. You're in love, you get married, you're together. Life is going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. And as life happens and the passion may fade because that comes and goes, then you know what? That best friend is going to see you through.
But I see my husband as like my husband is my biggest cheerleader.
Okay.
My biggest supporter.
Okay.
He's always there. He would go through the fire. Okay. I have no doubt. But when I think of best friend, I think of a different type of relationship. Is that wrong? I mean, Renee, as your...
Well, I feel like when I hear you say your husband or your spouse should be your best friend, I wonder if it's okay to say that best friend fits this need that I have. I have other friends who are also very close to me who fit other needs. That's kind of how I see it.
Yes, I would see that too.
Your spouse can't really be your all, though, right?
No.
It's okay for them to feel a certain need, but you have other friends for other needs?
Absolutely, but your spouse really, they know everything about you. It's a sacred relationship, and so they need to be your best friend. Absolutely, but they're not going to fill all the spaces. They're not a girlfriend.
I know for me, I talk about my relationship with my friends.
Okay.
And I've heard that you shouldn't necessarily talk about your relationship with your friends, because sometimes you may share something that, is challenging, and your friends may have a difficult time letting that go even after you and your spouse have made up and moved on. Do you think that women should talk to their friends about their relationship?
I think it's a really good point that you make. I think it's good to have one trusted confidant. But I think the idea of your friends then sharing how they would handle a situation, you can really get into trouble because they're not connected to that soul partner. You are. So I think it's important that you have one confidant that you trust. I would say someone with wisdom. I probably would stay away from telling too much personal information to your friends.
But I know how women are because I'm a woman.
Yep.
and it's not that we're not really blabbing. We need someone to comfort us and say it's okay and you're not alone. Like, I know there are things that I'm not going to get from my husband. He's you know what? When I'm going through a challenging thing, and he, like Angela's spouse, is my biggest supporter. But sometimes I just hold me versus get out there and go do it and whatever. Right. So because of that, obviously I trust my husband, he trusts me.
Right.
What do you do if you feel like your spouse has betrayed a trust?
I think you definitely have to talk about it. You got to communicate.
Can you come back from that? Can you come back from, say, a cheating situation?
Absolutely, but you have to decide that that's what you want to do, and then you really have to forgive.
And I think that people say that, but the hard work of forgiveness, I don't think a lot of people talk about. That's hard.
It's hard work, and I would definitely seek out a professional for a betrayal situation.
Let's say your husband of 21 years doesn't like your friends, or a couple of your friends, or whatever. I mean, is there a way that you can convince them, or do you just have to be comfortable with the fact that, hey, this is oil and water, and they're just not ever going to get along?
I'd say both of you have to be comfortable with the idea that these are my friends, and you're still going to love your friends. You're still going to want to spend time with them, and so your spouse has to be okay with that. And then every once in a while, you'll probably want to do things together, and then to have that mutual respect that it's okay. I'll be respectful and kind to your friends where I may not want to hang out with them, but every once in a while, making it okay.
But you also have to talk to your friends about respecting your spouse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that there's some clear boundaries, right, in that relationship.
Absolutely.
So
and getting to the core of really what the issue is, too. Why don't they like your friends?
But it's so easy to say in this forum, just talk about it. But it's very difficult to have uncomfortable conversations with your spouse and your friends.
Of course.
That's really, because there's going to be a back and forth. What is the best way to have an uncomfortable conversation with your friends?
Like the best way to have it. Don't hold it. Make sure you have the conversation. Put it out there. I always like to say, open people up with love, kindness, so then their heart is ready for that jolt of whatever, that you want to bring the conversation, have the conversation, and end it with love and kindness.
I think that really, and especially in the case with your spouse, is that to remember that you hold their heart in your hands.
Absolutely.
So, Eva Marie, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening, and thank you for sharing the tools that we all need for better communication and relationships.
Thanks for having me.
We'll hear more from the ladies when we come back. Follow us on Instagram at